Hello, my name is Dr. Vicki Chiang. I'm a psychologist and clinical director of the Child and Adolescent Specialty Practice at the Institute for Girls Development and Flourish Therapy and Wellness Center, a division of the Institute. For those of you who are not familiar, the Institute and Flourish are a psychological corporation here in Pasadena. We have three main initiatives. One, strength-based mental health services. Two, professional development and training. And three, community education. I wear a lot of different hats at the Institute, including supervision for our postdoctoral fellows, as well as providing workshops and trainings. But my primary passion and area of specialty is working with parents. And that's really because I am one. I'm a parent myself to a 12-year-old and 15-year-old, and much of my work is informed by them. I'm really grateful to be here today. What an incredibly devastating and heartbreaking few weeks it has been for our community. We've all been experiencing a collective trauma. As someone who grew up here, raising my own children here, and working in this environment and in this community, the impact has been significant. We want to offer this presentation as a free resource for our school and parent communities. I'm going to be switching over to sharing my screen right now so that you can follow along this PowerPoint presentation. So yes, thank you for being here today. As the impact has been big and small for some of us, for many of us, some of us just living in this community and seeing the impact to our family and friends. Some of us may be housing those that are displaced. Some of us who are displaced or even have lost our homes, having a much bigger impact on them, on ourselves. So I want to start by really focusing first on how we care for our own selves as caring adults in this community. Um, this is something that I think is important, and it's something I speak to my parents about all the time, is that we really can't help our children and teens until we really help ourselves. I want to begin by focusing on that this talk will be a first step towards healing, and that's what I hope to be able to do. So what we'll go through today is the different stages of development and how we can support each of our children and teens, and again, focusing also on ourselves. Most of you are probably familiar with the saying, put on your oxygen mask first. This is really important. This is hard work. The road is long, for some longer than others. So we're in it for the marathon, right? It's not a sprint. So we really have to turn and care for ourselves. And before we can provide the best care for our children and teens, we must start with us. These are tips, as you can see on my screen, that are probably very familiar to you. You've probably read some of this online already, and they bear repeating, including addressing your basic needs, making sure you're drinking water and hydrating, eating foods 3 meals a day, and getting really good sleep. The other is taking a media break and getting your social support as much as you can and avoiding isolation. I want to highlight a few on this on this slide, just to sort of point your attention to. One is taking a pause. Our nervous systems have been activated. We are in a state of constant dysregulation, right? And for those of you who are displaced or have lost a home, I am sure you have been in a place where the nervous system has been feeling very vulnerable. So taking a pause is actually one of the best ways to re-regulate and find that baseline so that your system can be calm. And taking a pause can be closing your eyes for a minute and taking deep breaths, finding little moments in between when you're moving from here to there, whether that's dropping off donations, gathering supplies for your own family, figuring out the school situation with emails, taking a pause, that is going to be the most effective way, again, to settle your nervous system. So my invitation for you for the next few weeks and coming months is to see how many times you may be able to pause in a day. So that might mean after you're listening to this talk, you're going to close your laptop and just take a moment to close your eyes and to take a deep breath. And maybe you allow yourself to do that for at least a minute. Those are those moments that help our systems kind of re-regulate. The other is to pay attention to your sensory sensitivities. Lately, there's been a lot of dysregulating things related to our five senses: smells of smoke, imagery that's been scary, right? The wildfire, the actual fires, homes that have been destroyed. We may be feeling our bodies may be more sensitive to the dry air or the heat or the wind. So really leaning in and engaging and soothing some of our body. And that means paying attention to what soothes our senses. If you are somebody who's really sensitive to light, for instance, and the overhead lights often bother you, dim those or just turn on the lamp. Noise, that's something I really relate to. I'm very activated by a lot of noise in my background. So this is when I'm going to be putting in my noise canceling AirPods or earphones. And that might mean I'm playing really gentle music, or that might mean I'm listening to something that I enjoy. But nevertheless, I'm paying attention to that. We want to engage our children in this too, so that they learn a way to sort of re-regulate their systems. And it can just start with paying attention to what soothes my body. If you're somebody physically that also really enjoys movement and needs it, pay attention to that. So those are things that's what we mean by paying attention to your sensory sensitivities. We are, again, like I mentioned, in it for the long haul here in a marathon, which means we must pay attention to what provides soothing sensations. So I invite you again to think about that for yourself and your family. Finally, the last thing I really want to point out here on this slide is offering yourself self-compassion. Self-compassion is a skill that we actually teach. And it's interesting. And my favorite way to define it is to treat yourself as you would treat your closest and dearest friends. And isn't it interesting that we have to remind ourselves to do that? When we became parents or when decided we want to become teachers, we didn't get any guidebooks on how to help children and teens and ourselves navigate the most catastrophic natural disaster our city has ever seen, right? That was not in the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. We also for sure did not get this guidebook that also said not only would you be surviving this intense and catastrophic natural disaster, you would also be doing it 5 years after a global shutdown and pandemic. So be kind to yourself. We are navigating unprecedented territory here. And yes, I know that's an overused word these days, but it is really true. So really turn compassion to yourself and remind yourself this is really hard. When things feel really difficult, when you are feeling really overwhelmed, that's because this is very overwhelming. Nothing is business as usual. So to expect ourselves to be able to do things like we would when business as usual is an unfair expectation. None of this will feel normal, and it might not for quite some time. So offer yourself that self-compassion. That becomes really important when I talk about these two particular um, vicarious trauma and survivor's guilt. What you are feeling, and this is particularly to a different sets of people in their experiences right now. Vicarious trauma, I'll start with that, is the emotional impact of being exposed to traumatic experiences of others. In this community, we know, and many of you who are watching this know several people who have not only been displaced, but also have lost homes. I'm sure many of us can easily rattle a lot of names. That itself can be traumatic. And so I think what's important to recognize for yourself when you're experiencing that and where it becomes problematic is that we minimize that. We get up and we say, well, why am I feeling anxious? Nothing happened to me. Why can't I pay attention and focus on work? Nothing happened to me. Well, in fact, it's true that although it did not happen to you, you would be feeling, and it would be completely normal to experience an emotional impact. The other is survivor's guilt. We've been hearing this over and over again in the last few weeks coming out of the wildlife fires. For those of you who still have homes standing and perhaps in a neighborhood in a street where many, many homes did not, the feeling of sadness and guilt that can occur when someone survives a traumatic event is called survivor's guilt, and that may be something you may be experiencing. Something that I like to remind people when this comes up is that feelings aren't fact, right? We feel guilty, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are guilty. Right. Guilt is a normal emotion. It helps, it's our moral compass, and it comes up when we have intentionally hurt somebody, right? So nobody would have wished this upon anybody to have their homes burned down and not yours, right? So that's not an intentional harm. You didn't cause intentional harm. So remind yourself that I feel guilty, but I am not guilty. And what we do and the way we help sort of process this is to, again, start with giving yourself a lot of self-compassion. This has never happened to me before. This is really hard. I deserve compassion. I want to be able to help my friends. And I'm also feeling grateful my home is still standing. Those two things can occur at the same time. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're actually a human who's experiencing a lot of very challenging things. So just hold those things in your mind as we sort of reflect on your own experiences here. It's just really important to remind ourselves that this is difficult and we're all experiencing different things and to pay attention. People do seek out professional support for these two things. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we actually in the section when I speak about our teens. But this is really typical of a lot of people who have experienced trauma, either secondary or also survived a trauma. So again, pay attention to your own needs. And if you do need to seek professional support, I highly encourage you to do that. I'm going to shift gears now and talking to about our children and teens. So here are some ways that children and teens respond to traumatic events. One is they have difficulty concentrating and focusing. You're going to see perhaps a change in the way they are engaging in everyday routines, such as trouble eating or sleeping, loss of interest in activities that they typically enjoy, perhaps even physical challenges like stomach aches and headaches. You might have heard of some complaints of that as school started to open up again. Also, feelings of guilt, like we talked about, survivor's guilt is present for children and teens. There may be some anxiety and worry. Our entire community right now is full with a lot of anxiety and worry. So it would not be surprising that our children and teens would be experiencing that. You might see some withdrawals, some isolation, wanting to be on their own, becoming more irritable and having low frustration tolerance, right? When we are feeling dysregulated and activated, our patience goes pretty quickly. I think as adults, we can relate to that. So we might see more irritability. There may also be some engaging in risk-taking behaviors and poor performance in school. All of this is going to be on a spectrum. And there is a point where we would encourage seeking out additional support. And we'll talk about at the towards the end of this presentation. As adults, when we look at this list, we might actually have things, part of it that we would also relate to, right? So this isn't just something that children and teens experience. It's also something adults can experience as well. I'm going to start with talking about how to support children ages 5 to 10. So this is going to be our elementary school aged. Really what you're thinking, these are, they're at a stage where they're more concrete in thinking, and there's going to be varying levels of awareness or understanding of the fires. What we know is for some children, they may have been very, very much shielded by the information and don't really understand what's happening. And there may be some, particularly those whose impact is personal, right? Either they've lost it at home or have been evacuated and unable to go back. The level of awareness they have is much greater. What I always like to start with my recommendations in working with young kids around difficult and big topics is to keep the conversation short. And I equate it to appetites, small meals, small bites. So instead of thinking about a big discussion, like a digesting a really big plate of food, for our little ones, we want to make sure that they're smaller. They have smaller appetites for that, right? So that it's taking bites, small bites here and there, but that they're ongoing. We don't just take one small bite and never come back. We actually have a conversation, but we just keep it shorter. The other thing is to always think about the question they are asking and answering that question only. I think as adults, we have a tendency to over explain and maybe share more that's necessary. So just think about what is the question they're asking and stick to that as close as you can. The other piece of it is allowing for playing and drawing and reenacting. Play is the natural way children communicate. Just like if I were to call my very close friend to process all of this, and believe me, I've done that a lot these past few weeks. Children don't always have the language to do that. So allowing space to play and draw and reenact. In the days after 9/11 and months, we saw a lot of children reenacting and playing that buildings that had planes flying into them and pictures of that and reenacting that. And that was sometimes really scary for adults to see and wanted to stop that really quickly. Well, actually, in fact, children need to do that, right? You may have shared your evacuation story with many of your closest friends and family. When children play and draw and reenact it, that's like them doing it too. So allow space for that. Reassuring their safety. This is an age where we want to help them reassure their safety. And we can do that very simply by telling them that you help pack their bags to evacuate and that you got them to a safe place. And now firefighters are here and they're here working on putting out the fires, reminding them that you are always going to be there to work on their safety. The other thing is really helping them identify their feelings. If you have a little one that's asking a lot of questions, you might say, gosh, it seems like you might be feeling really worried. That's really normal to feel that way about this. So use the language of feeling so that they can identify it, because the more language they have to describe what they are feeling, the better off they will be. So how might we respond and communicate with little ones? I talked about only answering the question that they are asking. Well, here's some common questions we've been hearing, like, what if it happens again? And you can remind them really quickly. We have learned a lot about wildfires and safety. If you've been in the position of evacuating, you've probably thought to yourself, maybe I need to think a little bit clearly about our own emergency preparedness. So you can let them know we've learned so much and that we are able to help ourselves, our friends, and our neighbors, and remind them and help them identify who in your life helps you. And hopefully they're able to identify parents, their teachers, firefighters, doctors. So helping them understand who's there to help them so that their anxiety can decrease. The other is questions like, will this keep going? Will the fires keep burning? Well, this is what we know, and we can help them understand that natural disasters end, like fires, even tornadoes and earthquakes, hurricanes. They all stop at some point. Sometimes we don't know when, but they do. So sometimes that is just a reassuring thing to help children understand. At some point, this does end. The quote unquote normal can happen at some point, but it might be a little bit of time or maybe a long time. So just helping them remind them. I also like to remind children and teens that although things may not feel completely normal, for sometimes we get used to a new normal, and remind them of times that they did that. Maybe you've moved a home and it didn't feel normal, but at some point it did. Or remind them of when they went from in-person school to Zoom school, online school during the pandemic. That again, it felt weird at first and then it felt normal. So those are just ways that you can help prepare them. So now moving on to our middle schoolers and teens. So how do we support this age? Well, one thing that we know about this age is that they need more space to express feelings. And this comes in different times. It's sort of the classic teenager that walks in your room right when you're about to get ready for bed and they want to talk things out. Allow them space for that right now. They may need to do that with you, but they may also choose not to and be doing it with their friends, and that's okay. But however you do it, however they choose to, give them the space because they need to. This is the age where it's almost the opposite of our little ones, where they're probably informed at this point. They've seen all the pictures. They've probably gotten videos from their friends of themselves fleeing their homes or even the aftermath. They may be seeking that information out on social media. So it's really helpful to remind them to take breaks. One of my favorite ways about reminding them is actually modeling that. It's just verbalizing for myself. I've seen so many pictures of this. I'm not sure this is helping me anymore. So I always ask the question, is this helpful at this point? On the days following the initial fire of Eaton Canyon when it broke out, and we probably were all stuck on our screen, one of the things I reminded myself and just sort of asked out loud in my own family was, is this helpful anymore? And we all thought, no, it's actually more distressing. It's making me feel worse. So we turned it off. The other thing is, if you have a child a teen that's really having a hard time setting aside social media and putting down their phone and not engaging in this information, is to see, like, can they turn their media focus on something different? So instead of looking at distressing pictures or scary videos, you might show them the videos of, for instance, the firefighters and the video over seeing them over the Rose Bowl. because that's their staging area. And they're like, gosh, how good does that feel? The whole country and the world, there are people outside of the country from Mexico and Canada that came in to help us. Or you might show them the really amazing community efforts out there. There's some amazing organizations, some started by teens themselves, like Altadena Girls, and you might show, wow, look at what our community is doing. So see if, and then you can assess with them and help them see, does this feel different? Yeah, it feels really good. It feels really good to see people helping each other out. This is also the age that they start cultivating a worldview that's often heavily influenced by peers and media. So we want to just sort of take a pause and help them reflect on that a little bit, counteract stereotypes and overgeneralizations, and see if you can identify ways to help them fact check their source so that they're not repeating things that they heard that are false. So that's just something to pay attention to when we have teens really, really engaged in their social media use and maybe either spreading information that may not be true. And remind them just how it feels. Remind them like the stereotype of, oh yeah, the only people in LA who got their homes burned down were celebrities. And that doesn't feel good to be on the other side of that because every single one of us know it's not true. So again, providing them some information about that and helping them fact check it a little bit. We want to help them identify what they could do to calm their own nervous systems. Maybe after this talk, you'll go with them like, hey, I've learned something really different about my sensory sensitivities. I'm curious what yours are. Do you like what soothes your body? Is it playing with a pet? Is it moving your body? Is it journaling? Is it listening to music? So help them identify that. And the other thing right now is to help them create a feeling of purpose and control. There are so many things out of their control. There are so many things that they are worried about that they don't know what to do with. But there we can shift their focus to what they do have control and purpose over. So that might be sorting through donations, which you may have already done already. It may be donating some money to the Pasadena Humane Society. It may be donating to GoFundMe pages of friends and families and teachers that they feel close to. So that's again something to remind that they do have some control over, and it's helpful to pay attention to those. Communication with teens is going to look a little different, right, than our younger ones, who we stay focused on certain small bits of information about the natural disaster and the wildfires. Well, here teens, again, over-informed at this point, but I always talk about while they're in that space of having all the information, we as adults want to be clear, direct, and truthful. This is the age, right? That always, how many of you have a teen in your home or in your classroom that's like, I know, I know, I know, right? They know a lot, they know everything. Well, let's lean into that a little bit. When we have scary information to share, big information, tough information to digest, there's a natural inclination for us adults to sort of overprotect or minimize, right? Well, I want to help invite all of us to avoid that actually. I call it talking to the wise girl, particularly when I have clients of teen girls, but talking to your wise teen. Every single one of you have one as in that knows somebody that there's a wise part of themselves inside. So we're going to talk to that teen that can handle this. When we do that, we give the message that we think they're brave and courageous and smart and that they can handle it. And that actually helps a lot of teens rise to the occasion. The other thing is to try to avoid promises you can't keep, like saying everything will be okay. It's fine. No worries. We'll be okay. We don't always know that, right? And sometimes our middle schooler and teenagers know that, in fact. And so that's not soothing to them. So focus on saying things that you are in control over. Like, no matter what, I'm here to help you figure this out. At the Institute for Girls Development, we have our motto is don't worry alone. Don't worry alone. So what I share about that is when you are worried about something, share it. And you have a lot of different people who love and want to support you. And as an adult and as your parent, I'm here for you. So that's really what we want to sort of focus on. The other thing we can help with teens is to help them ask them, what would help you? What information would help you right now? Or you may be in a position of the unknown, right? You may have a home that is standing, but you aren't sure when you can move back, when you might have access to your things. And there's a lot of question marks there, right? So help your teen and say and ask them, would it be helpful for me to let you know information when I find out. So whenever I find out the info, I'm going to share it with you. See if that would be help them get a little bit more information that might help them, again, decrease the worry and the anxiety. The other thing, this goes along with sort of saying everything will be okay, is avoiding toxic positivity. We now know that it's really invalidating. It just really doesn't help. So right now, it's okay to help them see that you are paying attention to how they are feeling. And that does mean sometimes validating the feeling that they are expressing, which could be sadness, anger, frustration. And when we help them feel seen, we actually help them feel better. Being mindful of vicarious trauma, at the Institute, we actually get quite a few calls from parents about this, and they don't particularly use that term, but they'll say something like, oh, my teen was okay until her very best friend had to go into a residential treatment center for self-harm, or my teen was fine until she witnessed a terrible accident on her street, and she right now has so much anxiety and doesn't want to get in the car. So this is a real thing. Being mindful and be aware. If we're noticing again changes in behavior concerning things, which we're going to talk about in a minute, don't hesitate to seek out additional support. Giving them opportunities to be independent and alone with their peers. Um, Natural disasters like this, and we saw this very much during the pandemic, halt and stop sort of developmental development, right? What do teens need right now? They need to be with their peers, and they need to be, and they're wanting to be independent from us. So if you have been displaced, you may be living in a hotel room or somebody's or a family member's bedroom or a back house, and your teen may have lost their own personal space, right? Giving them opportunities and really sort of being intentional about it so that you know that they get to have a little bit of what their developmental needs are. So that might mean perhaps hopefully they have got a close friend that they can go over to that friend's house, or that they can be dropped off at the mall and do the things that they want to do. Go down to the closest school to throw a football around, whatever it is that they enjoy, being intentionally seeking that out for them right now, because they may be in a situation that is hard for them to really be able to express what they want, because developmentally, again, they're meant to be doing things with friends outside of their homes or on their own. At this age, they also very much may be interested in emergency preparedness. Just like for little ones, we can say, oh, the firefighters are here to help us and they're here to put out the fires. That's sometimes enough for a little one to feel really better about the situation. That's probably not enough for our middle school and teens. What we want to sort of lean into for this age is getting them involved, helping them talk through your own emergency preparedness. So if at school, it's reminding them what that is at school. And if you're in your homes, it's to asking them and getting them interested in to sort of maybe writing one out, doing our own drills. Those kinds of things can really help. So when do you want to seek additional support? You may want to when you start to notice just is changes, right? Behavioral changes, intense feelings, and sleep disruption, and impact on daily functioning when they don't want to participate in regular activities. I like to pay attention to three things: duration, frequency, and intensity, right? So if something like the feelings of sadness, if the duration, meaning it's taking place for a longer period of time, it's frequent. So it's not just every few days, it's every day or multiple times a day. And it's intense, meaning the sadness is feeling, the crying is more intense than typical. You're going to want to pay attention to that. That's sort of a kind of pause to say, should we be seeking out additional support? As a parent or a teacher, you may get a sense that the children you're with and your students or your own teens are just not themselves. So pay attention to that intuition. The other side note I just want to say is you don't actually have to wait for anything to be wrong or symptoms to appear to seek support. We want our young people to know that there's a lot of different ways to support ourselves when we're going through hard times. We can get outside and play catch with our friends, go to the mall, talk to our teachers, but also there's professional support. So we always want them to know that there's a whole team of people who are professionally trained to help them with something like feelings, and that there's no shame in seeking that out. And even putting that as an option. Would you like to talk to somebody, like a clinician or a therapist, a therapist to work on this that's private and your own space? Give them those options and see if that would be helpful. Keep in mind right now, like I said at the start, this is not business as usual. Things are really, really, really tough, right? So we might be expecting some of this right now. So you're just wanting to keep an eye on this over time. And finally, here are some things that are just tips for every age. Again, some of these things you may be familiar with. I'm going to highlight a few. One is just starting with validation. This is something I talk about a lot when it comes to just how we manage big feelings. In parenting, I almost bring this up at every session. Validation is two steps, and that's what I like to call it empathy plus, right? Empathy is, I understand how you feel, right? It's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Validation is taking one step further than that. It's, I understand how that feels. I can imagine you feeling sad about that. And that makes sense. How that makes, what we're trying to convey in this moment is, I see you. I understand how you feel. And that makes sense to me. It's validating to be able to feel that. And that actually can do a lot to just re-regulate, and if you've got a dysregulated child or teen in front of you, that can be the first step to help re-regulate. Co-regulation is another piece that I think is really important, and it's seen as one of the most effective tools to help with regulation when our feelings are big. Co-regulation just means using your own grounded and calm body to be of a grounding resource with somebody who's dysregulated, right? So that you're offering calm, you're offering a sense of safety. The other thing I want to point attention to, and this might almost feel like the opposite of what I just said about co-regulation. Um, Parents, teachers, grown-ups, all of us here doing this work, it's okay to show your emotions. So what I mean by co-regulation is that your body is regulated so that when you're showing your emotions, it's not in a really scary, out of control place. Now, well, before I get to that, let me just stick with this for a second. It's okay to show those emotions. You are human, so you might find tears. And something that's helpful about emotions, particularly tears, is to say out loud, I'm crying because I'm just feeling so heartbroken for our community. I'm heartbroken for our friends who have lost their homes. And actually, it's okay for me to cry. I feel actually sometimes better when I cry. So you might see me doing that every now and then. And just know that I know how to take care of my own self. Our emotions as adults are only really scary to our teens and children when they don't know if they should take care of us or if we'll be okay. So that's the reminder. When we show emotions, we just help remind our children and teens, I know how to handle this. This feels okay to me to be tearful, and I know how to take care of myself when I'm feeling really intense and sad. Now, let's say you weren't able to hold back your emotions because, of course, why would you? Things are so hard, right? And let's say that they did see you in a place where you felt a lack of control of your feelings. There is actually, this is actually very healing, is to go back and check in and say, I know you saw me in the worst time because we got news of our home, or we got news of our neighbor's home, or grandma's home, or whoever it is, or your school, and you saw me get really, really upset. How was that for you? And that's all you have to do is a check-in. I imagine that might have been scary. I just want you to know, after that, I just really took care of myself. I reminded myself that I like tea, and that makes me feel really good to have some tea, and it calmed my body, and I went outside for a walk. So what you're doing right there is you're acknowledging that it might have been scary for them, but that you were able to take care of yourself. So that's what we mean when emotions are part of being human. So it's really important that our teens and our kids see that it's okay to be human. We are not here to be superhuman. We're not here to be quote unquote perfect. So remind yourself that when you start to get emotional, it's okay. And the final thing I'm gonna also say is help them stay connected and help you stay connected. Isolation, that's actually something that can be really, really hard during this time. Lean into your community, lean into your support. If you are somebody who is in need of support, whether that's being displaced or having lost a home, say yes to the people around you to support you and find your community. This is a time where community can be, again, the place where we start healing. And as we end today, I just want to end with this quote. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. We are all trying our best and doing our best. When you put care and compassion to yourself, you are doing that little bit of good for your community. Their need is high. There's a lot to do. Just reminding yourself all the little things that you're doing do matter and they do change the world in our community and will. Thank you so much for being here today. This is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. We at the Institute are here to help you. We have a lot of different resources. You'll see that we are offering some free webinars that will also be posted that you have access to. And of course, for mental health support, please do not hesitate to reach out. Our website also has this information and will also include resources for psychological first aid on the LA wildfires. You'll see our contact information on the bottom of this screen and this slide. And these resources, which will also be listed on our website. So thank you again. I'm grateful to be in community with all of you. And I hope that, and we'll be sending out healing and peace and many moments of pause to all of you in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.